Spring savings are in the air and at Ross, where they have savings on all the brands you love. From the latest fashion to outdoor decor and even pet supplies, savings are in every aisle. Go to Ross and save 20 to 60% off other retailers' prices on your favorite spring finds.
Today's episode is sponsored by NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast. Making financial decisions shouldn't feel like picking a new streaming show. There are too many options, it's too easy to fall for the hype, and you may end up wishing you'd done more research before committing. That's where NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast comes in. Their finance journalists break down real-world money decisions from investing to home buying to credit cards with clear, research-backed insights. The nerds help you cut through misinformation and get straight to the facts. Make your next financial move with confidence. Follow NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast on your favorite podcast app. And stay tuned later in the show to hear more about topics you can learn on smart money.
And now is the moment in our show when we break for a word from our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible. I'm Julia Turner, and this is the Slate Culture Gabfest. Andor is a Star Wars series that about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive. It's Wednesday, April 29th, 2025. Visit Progressive.com. And on today's show, we're talking about the second and final season of Andor. The brilliant savings will vary. Not available and ambitious for a Star Wars show. TV show from Tony Gilroy that asks what makes ordinary people become revolutionaries. Is it courage, stubbornness, fear, grief? Then the director behind the charming recent rom-com Fire Island has remade Ang Lee's indie classic The Wedding Banquet, updating its narrative about homophobia and generational disconnects. Now is the moment in our show when we break to take a word from our sponsor. Our podcast today is brought to you by Progressive Insurance, Haley Marie Tran, and Minari Fiscally Responsible, Jung, financial geniuses, monetary magicians, scientists have invented people say about drivers only who switch their car insurance. It's called Olo, and it is some kind of Progressive.com. We will discuss. Steve and Dana are out this week, but joining me today is extreme friend of the program, not available in welcome, Dan, or situations.
Thanks for having me.
Delighted. And rounding out our panel is distinguished and discerning friend of the program,
and also
Zaynab
Issa of the business as well.
Good to be with you, Julia.
Andor is an unusual
Dan,
Star Wars project for a few reasons.
Business
it
today.
Is a prequel to the 2016 film Rogue One, in which
Dan,
most
can
of
you
the
hit us
major
with the
characters,
business
I think
today?
we can say now 9 years later, die, sacrificing their lives to help the Resistance fight the Empire. So we know what happens to the major characters. What the story focuses on is how and why people might join such a noble effort and the toll that that commitment takes. It's also unusually real. There aren't too many lightsabers or even creatures, just a lot of humanoids and undocumented farm workers, discourses on textile economies, awkward weddings.
Bad moms,
yeah. And it's also, I think, very, very good. So good, in fact, that we are breaking our usual rule of only talking about first seasons. Before we dive into our conversation, let's listen to a clip from the show. We're going to hear the lead character, Cassian Andor, played by Diego Luna, giving a pep talk to a new recruit to the Resistance just before they embark on a dangerous mission.
If I die tonight, was it worth it? You've done this before. You must have thought about it.
This makes it worth it. This. Right now. Being with you, being here at the moment you step into the circle. Look at me. You made this decision long ago. The Empire cannot win. You'll never feel right unless you're doing what you can to stop them. You're coming home to yourself. You've become more than your fear. Let that protect you.
All right, Sam, well, you wrote about the show for Slate. I'd love to hear your take on what makes it so striking.
Well, I was a bit of a, maybe skeptic is too strong a word, but I guess a bit of a withholder in Andor's first season, which a lot of people really loved. And I thought was good, but a little kind of sort of distended and shapeless. And the second season, I gather they originally had a sort of 5-season plan for the show, and they have greatly truncated that to being a 2-season plan. And the second season basically takes place over 4 years, and each sort of 3-episode group jumps forward a year, moving towards basically the events of the first Star Wars movie. And I think that really has helped the storytelling, and also helps that they're sort of releasing it in 3-episode chunks. Every little chunk feels a little bit like a little movie, and they're all written and directed by the same person, which gives it a sort of unusual unity for television. What I really like about this season is it leans into the idea that you mentioned, Juliet, which is that we're watching a show about characters who we know for the most part are going to die. And that could be sort of a sad thing. But basically, the most interesting character for me is this kind of resistance leader named Luthen Rael, who is really sort of anti-hero is almost not really strong enough a word. He's somebody who has no problem sort of murdering innocent people if it furthers the aims of the resistance. And he just really embodies what this series and this season becomes about, which is, I think he offers the character Cassian Andor, played by Diego Luna, at one point a choice of basically Diego Luna is sort of a reluctant revolutionary, just wants to get back to his life. And he says to him essentially like, well, do you want to die fighting or do you want to die on your knees? Living is not really an option. Like, we're all going to die in the end. And it's like, are you going to make your life mean something, or are you just going to kind of go along and let this fascist entity take over the galaxy? And I really like the way that the show leans into that in its second season. I think it really makes a sort of ongoing, very, especially now, a very pertinent point about, sacrifice and giving meaning to your life, and not just existing for the sake of existing, but really trying to find meaning in
Dan,
struggle.
you're coming to the series cold. I think maybe did you even just watch parts of season 2? So you're our guinea pig for this as a non.
Yeah, I'm the test case.
Okay, how'd it work?
I shot the first 3 episodes of season 2 directly into my retinas, and I wanted to figure out, like, what I think many listeners might wonder is, can you drop into season 2 as a casual without watching season 1 of the series that everyone describes as very intricate and serious and complex? I am happy to say that I think you can. I'm sure I'm missing all kinds of nuances and details, but the trick of the series and its writing is that I don't know I'm missing them. I don't feel confused. Tony Gilroy is a whiz at a lot of things, as anyone who loves Michael Clayton can attest, but he's a whiz in this particular case at shorthanding everyone's relationships and dropping us into the action in a place that is intriguing and makes enough sense. He's good at hinting at the importance of season 1 events without demanding that we understand them completely. And so, if you're a person who's heard so much about this series and is like, ugh, I do not want to go watch something that's 2 years old or whatever, I just want to watch what people are watching now, you can do that, I think, and probably have a pretty good time. The seriousness of it, though, at times that is what hung me up about at least the amount of Andor that I have watched. The goal of Andor, it seems, in addition to having things to say about revolution and whether you'd rather die fighting or die on your knees, I might rather die on my knees. It just seems easier. But the structural goal of it seems to be to give us a real sense of what it is actually like to live in the waning days of this particular powerful empire. Of course, there are resonances beyond this fictional empire, but because they're immersing us in life at the end of the long imperial century, including the budding resistance movement. And I find this kind of novelistic storytelling a really honorable goal. I also, nevertheless, find it kind of faintly ridiculous to see this method applied to a children's property like Star Wars. Like, there's a whole subplot devoted to the internecine politics of the planning meetings for subjugating a planet for their space spiders. And
No, they're famous for their space spiders, but what we need is their calcite. You think that planet's all about spiders, but it's actually about calcite. And the actor who says calcite in that meeting says it calcite in an insane voice. But
do we even see the space spiders? I feel like it is indicative of what the show is. We do get a shot
of the space spiders in the instructional film that Tony Gilroy uses to explain a lot.
There's an infomercial, and then there's the toy spider. We get a model of the spiders.
Right.
Like, no offense to those of you who really love Andor, but it is sort of like if David Simon did a whole series about the structural failures that have befallen Sesame Street. Like, it's at times I just couldn't take it.
but also would watch. Like, he should do that. I hear Sesame Street needs funding help.
My biggest hesitation about Andor, I mean, I do is sort of, a lot of people kind of been referring to it as kind of like Star Wars for grown-ups. And I think that's sort of a fair description, and I find satisfying a lot of what comes out of that project. But at the same time, I don't know that that's, as you say, Dan, either what Star Wars is or sort of categorically better than like The Empire Strikes Back, for example. You know, this is a different kind of story, and that's great. That was part of the idea behind Rogue One in the first place, which Disney eventually quickly gave up on. But that was to do sort of stories shut off from the main river of Star Wars that were allowed to take on different kinds of stories, different kinds of tones. This was supposed to be sort of a gritty, like World War II, Bridge on the River Kwai type movie. You know, and I think that's an interesting project, but I'm a little wary of just saying like, "Oh, it's so much better than the original ones because it's more serious." It's like I don't know that serious is necessarily what I want from a Star Wars project. I like it in this one, but I also don't think it's worse to have, you know, wisecracking droids in your Star Wars.
The droids are, you know, occasionally witty in this. I mean, I think I'm probably the biggest and most unabashed fan. Like, the first season totally knocked me out. I think it's my favorite, one of my favorite TV shows, certainly of the last 5 years, if not the favorite. I just thought just the writing, the psychological acuity, and the interestingness of the questions it was asking and the sophistication of the answers it was gesturing toward, plus the production design, plus just the unexpectedness of it, totally knocked me out. Really, really loved it. And Dan, I'm glad you answered the question, should I start with season 2? But honestly, I sort of think if you're at all interested in this, there's only going to be 2 seasons. Like, just watch the whole thing. The first season's really great. I mean, for the purposes of preparing for this podcast episode, made perfect sense. Glad you did that. But like, I think you'll be able to tell from this convo whether this show is for you or not. And if it might be at all, I would just start at the beginning because season 1's pretty smashing. I'm 4 episodes into the second season, so I'm still figuring out what I think of how accelerated the timetable is and whether that's going to be satisfying and delightful or just kind of tantalizing and not allow the show enough time to dig into these meaty questions. I mean, I do think this is better than Star Wars, but I don't really think that's the point. I think it's just the only first Star Wars property that's ever felt like it was for me. Like, I've watched most of the Star Wars. Some of those movies are good. Some of them are fun. Never thought a whit about them the moment I stepped out of the theaters. Like, they're just not, I don't know, they're just not that interesting to me. I've never been a super fan. So to watch Tony Gilroy, who's such an interesting figure, right? Known as a writer and director of Michael Clayton, but really more known as this screenwriter who's done a bit of directing and then kind of been able to erect this entire world with an enormous budget, huge production design. Like, essentially, he's just using Star Wars as a Trojan horse to make a Wire type show about the complex psychological and bureaucratic realities of revolution. And like, great. I love that project. Sounds great. Like, I'm fine with that because I don't have any reverence for the horse. So use it for whatever you want. Like, I'm not anti Star Wars. I'm just like, sure, good job, everybody. Glad you guys like it. You know, like, that's my relationship to Star Wars. So maybe that's what enables me to be such an Andor super fan. And I feel like maybe you guys have more fondness. So can you speak to it from someone, from the perspective of people who care more about the original property?
I would say I'm exactly the opposite. I have an actual antipathy towards Star Wars. And therefore, everything in this show that is Star Wars-y gets my hackles up. Like, I really love complex, hard science fiction. You know, I really love books and movies that use future worlds, or in this case, galaxies far away and a long time ago, to explore these like complex moral and political and philosophical questions. It's just that also it's Star Wars, so it drives me nuts. And I can't get over that aspect. I think that if I take your point and respect it, that Tony Gilroy is using Star Wars as a Trojan horse, and I understand that that's simply the only way that a show like this is ever going to be made in the year 2025, it has to be associated with IP. I would have liked it so much more if it had just been a Tony Gilroy science fiction show with none of the trappings of the Star Wars universe, that never says the words Mon Mothma, that never reminds me of this series of mildly okay to aggressively bad movies for young people that I have liked less and less over the course of my life. And maybe the answer to that is I should just get over it and just enjoy the show for what it is, which is good, and not worry about the Star Warsiness of it. I certainly would have a much better time.
Okay, I misjudged you. Sam, you like Star Wars?
Weirdly, I did not anticipate coming into this discussion having to be the defender of Star Wars. But yeah, I think Star Wars is, at least occasionally, pretty great. Some of the movies are quite lousy. I haven't watched the last 2 or 3 TV shows, and I've found no vacuum in my life. I felt absolutely no FOMO, which is quite unusual for me. But I do think this is a pretty good and very interesting compromise between the sort of more sanded down, simplified, child-oriented, but I still think quite enjoyable storytelling of at least some of the best Star Wars movies, and the more complicated stuff that Tony Gilroy clearly wanted to get into in this story. I think, one of the most fascinating aspects of the series is he brings back Orson Krennic, who is Ben Mendelsohn's sort of cape-swirling villain from the Rogue One movie. But the main representatives of the Empire in the story are Dedra Meero and Cyril Karn, who are both sort of like mid-level imperial bureaucrats, various levels on the corporate ladder. And, they're bad. They're bad characters doing bad things. Dedra especially is who's in sort of the imperial CIA, basically, eventually sort of.
She's going to be in charge of the space spiders.
Yeah, well, she's basically willing to destroy an entire planet so that they can get fuel for the Death Star. And that's really bad. But you also see that these are people in the middle with, they want to have, relationships and advance their careers and stuff. And it does sort of show you how people, not, sort of just folks, people, at least people driven by ordinary, recognizable desires, can end up being part of this terrible, immoral, monstrous machine, rather than just being kind of evil and having deep voices and liking to wear capes. So I think it's very effective on that level. I think there is, if you keep watching, Dan, I would be interested how you feel about the series Endgame. I've seen the entire season and I won't spoil anything, but obviously this is a movie that at some point has to dovetail with the movie Rogue One. And that means, sort of getting things back onto the more mainline Star Wars thing. And the show is commendably, at least for me, free of Easter eggs. Although reading up, I think if you've watched all the various cartoons and read all the various books, you will, there are character names in there that will mean things to you that mean nothing to me. But it does eventually sort of have to get back on track. And I found that as the end game of this 24 episode novelistic storyline to be a little bit of a letdown. Eventually they have to kind of, show the shark. But I think so much of what happens in there is, so satisfying and interesting and unique. I mean, this is I think the second most expensive television show ever made after Game of Thrones. And you would never be able to do this kind of storytelling. You wouldn't be able to spend 3 episodes on the sort of deluxe, Italian Renaissance wedding of Mon Mothma's daughter if you didn't have Star Wars in there to give them the budget to do that. And then you get to see Mon Mothma going ham on the dance floor, which is, great.
Something none of us ever thought we'd see after Return of the Jedi.
No. So, I mean, it's, I appreciate this is art that's sort of made in the real world. And there are always, as you say, Dan, sort of IP compromises just to get the budget to do something like this. So I think I should sort of take that as the buy-in at this point, and I just sort of move past that. So I think you're right to raise that point, but also I'm so grateful that the rest of this was allowed to exist that I'm willing to put up with some of the sort of sillier franchise parts of it.
I think our regular listeners know that I'm a longtime fan of the screenwriting podcast, Script Notes. And what I love about that show, it's screenwriters talking about screenwriting, and it's very craft focused. And I just feel like it's this interesting window into the inner workings of the kinds of stuff that we end up critiquing on our show. And they interviewed Tony Gilroy a couple weeks ago, which was a great interview for a number of reasons, including it featured Craig Mazin, one of the co-hosts, who's the creator of The Last of Us, learning that Tony Gilroy figured out how to be done. Tony Gilroy figured out how to do his four seasons in one season and have this not take over a whole decade of his life. And just hearing Craig Mazin's dismay was a great moment in that show. But a thing that is a constant in that show is the way that folks working in Hollywood have to be able to combine true artistry, but also be tradesmen, practitioners. And there's just something, the pragmatism of the craft of this and the fact that it is not an excuse to temper the ambition of the show is really like, I don't know, exciting to some part of my soul. Like, it's like, yeah, he figured out how to get this story told. This is an interesting story to tell right now. The question of like, what do you do when shit gets really, really dark? You know, not to sound like I'm taking moral cues from a Star Wars show, but like that is very interesting subject matter at our present moment. And the emotional and moral landscape of the show is sophisticated and thought-provoking and kind of great.
I mean, that's a great point, and it is a good reminder that that is the way it has always been in Hollywood, that the requirements you had to meet have changed over time, but the goals of artists to make good and important work within those strictures, whether it's the studio system or the code or the requirements of A movies versus B movies or whatever, there have always been artists who find a way to nestle inside that system and then work within it to make something really great nonetheless. And these days, the system you have to work within is the system of IP, unless you're Ryan Coogler, basically. You have to attach yourself to something like a leech in order to get the thing you made. It doesn't stop me from always having the accreted material information about the Star Wars universe that is jammed into my brain, unfortunately for me, forever coloring how I'm seeing it. This, like, how much happier would I have been in that scene in the apartment, the beautiful apartment of those two Imperial mid-level bureaucrats as they're preparing dinner for his mother, and they're playing like light music over the speakers. And all I could think was that how in the Star Wars universe, canonically, the popular music of the late Empire is called jizz. And unfortunately, that information is in my brain, and there's nothing I can do about it. If I could mind wipe myself of all Star Wars and watch Andor, I'd be so much happier.
All right. Well, for those of you who never knew that fact and wish they hadn't heard it right now, heartily recommend Andor. And for the rest of you, take your chances. It's available on Disney Plus. Half of this second and final season is now out. 6 of the 12 episodes available on Disney Plus.
Today's episode is sponsored by NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast. NerdWallet's finance journalists do the research so you don't have to. They break down the fine print, cut through misinformation, and give you real, fact-based insights so you can make smart financial moves. Smart Money covers a ton of financial questions and decisions. I did a little listening to NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast, and I came across a really good idea in one pretty recent episode. They talk about no-buy months, which can turn into no-buy weeks or no-buy years if you want to go really hard. It's just basically the idea that, you try to curb your spending and kind of figure out your spending psychology by trying to go a period where you don't buy any durable goods. You buy, obviously, groceries and things you need to live, but no clothes, no household items, no knickknacks. You just sort of live with the stuff you have. That happens to go well with something that I'm trying to do this year, which is clean out my apartment after almost 20 years of living in the same apartment and raising a child there. So it's a very, very deep excavation project. And I'm discovering how many things I have that I forgot I had, that I never use, basically shopping in my closet, which is a concept that they introduce in this episode. And it was nice and reinforcing to hear that that's an actual thing that people do. If you are also looking for ideas about how to spend or not spend your money, make your next financial move with confidence. Follow NerdWallet's Smart Money podcast on your favorite podcast app.
If there's one thing to learn from the entertainment industry, it's just how easy it is to earn a reputation, even if it doesn't reflect who celebrities really are. For example, everybody thinks that Discover is a card that isn't widely accepted, but in reality, it's accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Yeah, 99%. So maybe now you'll think twice before judging a book by its cover. Unless it's a celebrity cookbook, in that case, judge away. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/creditcard.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states and situations.
This new remake of The Wedding Banquet, indie director Andrew Ahn has teamed up with the co-writer of the original film, James Schamus, to modernize the story. The 2025 version features two queer couples living in Seattle, Lee and Angela, who hope to have a baby but can't afford their next round of IVF, and Min and Chris. Min is the scion of a wealthy Korean clan, and his grandparents back home don't know he's gay and want him to return to Korea to run the family conglomerate. It's a problem that might be solved any number of ways, but in this story has an extremely convoluted solution, one that prompts the sham wedding of the title. Before we dive into our discussion, let's listen to a clip. Here we're going to hear our central quartet, the couple Angela and Lee, played by Kelly Marie Tran and Lily Gladstone, walk in on an argument between Min and Chris, played by Hanji Chan and Bowen Yang, right after Min has proposed.
Why don't you believe me? What are you so scared of?
Min. What is going on?
Min proposed.
Oh my God. It's Cartier. Congratulations.
I tell you how much you mean to me. How much
Bullshit. Tell them why you really proposed.
I proposed because I love you. Because I want to be your husband.
Because his OPT visa runs out in a few months and he doesn't want to go back to Korea.
No, you're making this up.
Your grandmother just threatened to yank you back to Korea.
I bought the ring before. It's just a weird timing.
I'm not going to marry you so you can get a green card.
Oh, green card. I don't even want to be an American. Your trains are so slow and I never know how much to tip.
All right, Dan, tell us what you made of this film.
As I often do with remakes of movies that I remember fondly, I first went back to the original movie, the Ang Lee movie from 1993, to remind myself what I liked so much about it. Or rather, I tried to, except for it turns out the original Ang Lee movie is absolutely and completely unstreamable, not on any service, and I couldn't get a DVD to my house fast enough. So I have not rewatched the original. My memory is that in that version, the couples in question maintain the illusion that the wedding is real long into the film, and that the banquet itself, the titular banquet, is a huge centerpiece, a huge production. Like, isn't there a scene of like everyone banging their chopsticks on their water glasses and demanding a passionate kiss between the bride and groom? Like, there's all this rigmarole around this. And that movie isn't a farce exactly, but it has this farcical structure that drives it along, because you're waiting for the discovery, which you know is going to be cataclysmic. The plot being that a gay couple living in New York, one of whom is Taiwanese American and one of whom is Jewish, native born, they need to, for comical reasons, they need to stage a sham wedding between the Taiwanese American member of the couple and a woman to satisfy his parents, to fool them into believing that he is straight, and to keep their living situation from falling apart. And a similar situation more or less occurs in this movie. In this movie, Min and Chris, who are played by Hanji Chan and Bowen Yang, Min's grandmother tells him that he's about to lose access to his family money. She's in Korea. He is Korean American. She, in fact, flies to America just as they hatch a cockamamie scheme for Min to fake marry Angela, who is a lesbian in a relationship with Lee, in order to give her access to this family money so that they can continue IVF, and so that he has a way to escape having to return to Korea and go to work for the family business. So in both these cases, you have the situation where a gay man and a woman need to stage a wedding for the purposes of fooling an elder in their family. In the original movie, this fooling continues throughout the whole movie. That's like the engine of the movie. This remake is a lot gentler. And I think it's not a spoiler to say that it dispenses with those farcical aspects earlier. they can't keep up the sham as long in the year 2025 as they can in the year 1993. And that's the right decision on a plot level. But it also it takes a lot of the suspense and the comedy and the juice out of the movie. So the movie becomes really dependent on character, on emotion, and on the relationships, the two relationships at the center of it, which often work really well, but which also means that at times I felt like this movie got like a little bogged down in just like people talking about their feelings over and over and over and over and over again. Sam, what did you think?
I had sort of powerfully mixed feelings about this. Like you, Dan, I think I remember seeing the original when it came out. I was also unable to access it this time. I think that change in the setting is sort of really culturally interesting and reflective and does sort of hobble the movie inevitably. But really for me, the issue is that you have this one gay male couple and you have this lesbian couple, and I feel like those characters not only inhabit sort of different worlds, but live in different movies. And I really like one of those movies much more than the other. The male couple a lot of the writing is basically sort of sitcom level. I found kind of, grating and unsatisfying. And the relationship between Lily Gladstone and Kelly Marie Tran, I found just like infinitely more satisfying, better written, better acted, more interesting. There's a shot like right at the beginning of the movie where Kelly Marie Tran's mother, played by Joan Chen, is giving a big speech at this PFLAG banquet, talking about what a great ally she is, how supportive she is of, gay rights and yada, yada, yada. And her daughter is just watching her with this look on her face. And Lily Gladstone just kind of touches her arm and gives her this look that is sort of like not just sort of understanding and sympathy, like, oh, there's your mom going off again, but really like an understanding of the pain that this relationship has caused her throughout her life with her mother. And it's one of those moments when I feel like acting is sort of akin to sorcery. Like there's so much packed into that one Lily Gladstone look. There's the relationship between these two women. There's the relationship between the daughter and her mother. Those moments in this film are so satisfying to me. Lily Gladstone's performance, I think, is really great. And then a lot of the writing is really sort of glib and superficial and contrived. So I probably come closer to recommending it than not, but it's really kind of all over the place for me.
It's a confounding project in a couple of ways, because what happens to a farce when you pull the farce out? Right. Like then like the kind of writing that works in a farce is a little glib. Like think about the World's Best Frasier episode, right? Like it's part of why you don't notice how thin some of it is because the plates just keep spinning. So then you're sort of sitting in these scenes with people, and some of the writing is great and some is less great. It's funny you shout out Lily Gladstone's performance. She is, of course, extraordinary. And we have two, Oscar-nominated heavy hitters in this. Lily Gladstone did not end up winning hers. But to me, the person who steals every scene is Yoon Ye-jung, who won the Oscar for her role in Minari, legendary Korean actress, becoming more known here in America through projects like this and through her Oscar, obviously. And to me, the movie wakes up when she arrives. And the more interesting relationships are the cross-generational relationships. The twist that the issue with Kelly Marie Tran's character, Angela's mom, is not that she's homophobic, but that she sort of was homophobic, but had to kind of pretend to not be. So she didn't respond well in the moment when her daughter came out to her. But then she, rather than dealing with it, and her daughter just became like an extremely public social butterfly, right. LGBTQ ally, par excellence, a performative ally who's like not actually there for her daughter. Like what an interesting modern dynamic. That's a sophisticated concept for that relationship, and the scenes between those two evolve over time and are very moving. And then similarly, Min's relationship with his grandmother, who has been taking care of him since his parents died, is also very moving. And it's just fantastic when Yoon Ye-jung shows up like within seconds. I mean, it's almost worth it losing the farcical energy for just how immediately it crumbles in the face of her withering gaze. Like she's just sitting there staring at these idiots being like, obviously, I know you're gay.
This is the stupidest
obviously,
thing
you're
I've
not
ever
marrying
heard.
this woman. Like, you brought me here from Korea for this idiocy, and then,
like, do you really think I didn't know? Yeah.
And it's just like that scene is great, and it's the actual wedding banquet is this empty table with all the food that didn't get eaten for reasons that I won't get into for spoiler purposes with the two elders, right? The youngsters are figuring out their relationships, which have gone through various convolutions, but these two representatives of the older generation find each other quietly with the food. And it's sort of like, it's almost more theoretically interesting than it is dramatically interesting, right? Like in the way that our understanding and acceptance of LGBT lives has evolved since 1993. Maybe the farce is sometimes gone. Maybe the pretense sometimes can be gone. But what you're still left with is a lot of still complication, right? Emotional complication that requires love and patience and tenderness and kindness and talking. And a lot of the talking is moving, but a lot of the scenes are kind of draggy. Like, and I found it between both couples, actually. Like the scenes that never drag to me are the ones with the elders. And I found sometimes the Lee and Angela relationship also being kind of like them just
having the same fight over and over and over again.
Yeah, like I was not transported by every scene with Lily Gladstone, even though she's great, in the same way that just every time Yoon Jung comes on screen, I'm like, okay, I'm happy in this movie now. And the final, where her arc goes, I was genuinely quite deeply moved by. So I don't know. I mean, I'm curious what you guys thought of those elder characters.
I do think there's something really interesting going on with those older characters as someone who I guess is very vaguely sort of equidistant from the parent characters and the child characters in this story. You know, I often think about just the incredible like seismic shifts in LGBTQ rights that have gone on in my lifetime and is, you know, by far the biggest change that I've sort of been alive to witness. And you know, an interesting dynamic in this is the kid sort of assuming that their parents are in one place and their parents being somewhere else. Like their parents get more than their kids think they do. And that's sort of a really interesting and I think unexplored thing in movies. So I do find that sort of back and forth, and just like we know where sort of society is in general, but like where individual people and different cultures are. I think there's a lot of material in there that the movie gets at in a fairly satisfying way.
I totally agree about one of the things the movie is most interested in exploring is how growing acceptance and growing rights and equality for queer people has transformed the way that you address questions like this. And so thinking again back to the 1993 movie, you're right, Julia, that the plates were spinning longer in that movie, but there was more underneath those plates than this movie had, in part because the real subject of that movie wasn't even really queer life, which Ang Lee sort of, I think, knew a little about, but was using as a Trojan horse, if you will, to write about what he was most interested in, which was the cultural differences between Taiwanese elders and Americanized young people. And then also even beyond that, between Taiwanese people and Chinese people who never left China to go to Taiwan. Like there's multiple levels of cultural difference that are happening in that movie. And that's sort of what the big wedding banquet, which I think takes up like 25 or 30 minutes in the middle of this movie, those are the big differences that movie is exploring and most interested in digging into. In this movie, the intergenerational differences seem really to have not as much to do with the cultures at the heart of them and the immigrant versus home country delineation. So there's a little bit of that in the grandmother struggles to understand, you know, what her grandson is doing in America and how American he's become. But really, they're about queerness. They're about the differing levels of understanding, comprehension of, and acceptance of queerness. And that fits right in with Andrew On's last movie, Fire Island, with the interests, I think, of a lot of the people involved in making this movie. But it also means that because they don't explore those issues, I think, as deeply and richly as the 1993 movie explored these intercultural issues, it means that when the plates stop spinning, the movie starts treading water a little bit.
Yeah, I will say I found it interesting. There's so many good actors in it. I really have enjoyed being in the worlds of Andrew On the times that I have. It's interesting. Wedding Banquet is Ang Lee's second movie. I think this is Andrew On's fourth movie. And shortly after Wedding Banquet, Ang Lee got kind of scooped into the Hollywood machine a movie or two later in the 90s and pulled out of Indieland. And anyway, I remain a big fan of On and think there's a lot to chew over in this. And I, too, would like someone to make The Wedding Banquet available to me on screening. I guess I can get a DVD.
Yeah, they're out there. I will say, like, all the actors, no matter how varied their material is, are very good in this. And for example, it is so nice to see Bowen Yang in a real movie doing real acting. Like, this is not a masterpiece, but it's a million fucking times better than Wicked. And if more artists and young filmmakers were looking to early Ang Lee for inspiration, like, the world of movies would be a much better place. So good on everyone for that. And it's definitely worth watching for all of its struggles to sort of land everything it's trying to juggle.
All right. Well, the film is The Wedding Banquet. It's out now from Andrew Ahn, and definitely has a lot of great performances to chew over. All right. Well, the film is The Wedding Banquet from director Andrew Ahn. It's out in theaters now and available for pre-order on Apple TV, which it's coming too soon.
This episode is brought to you by Max, presenting HBO original comedy special, Brett Goldstein, The Second Best Night of Your Life. Emmy-winning actor, writer, and comedian Brett Goldstein brings his irresistible charm and quick wit stateside for his first ever HBO stand-up special. Goldstein sheds his testy Roy Kent facade to share his hilarious insights on love, sex, masculinity, and more. Brett Goldstein, The Second Best Night of Your Life, now streaming exclusively on Max.
24 chefs, 24 culinary showdowns for 24 hours straight. Which chef will outcook, outpace, outlast the competition?
No chef
Escapes the clock. All new 24 and 24, Last Chef Standing, Sunday night at 8. See it first on Food Network. Stream next day on Max.
All right, on to our final topic, the dorm roomiest of topics we've discussed in a while. You may have seen the Atlantic piece that was kicking around this week about, quote, the profound experience of seeing a new color. And if you are like me, you leapt to your cursor, clicking away and hoping to discover some four-dimensional portal in the spectrum. Alas, what scientists have discovered is a, quote, supersaturated teal, which sounds cool, but also within the realm of human imagination and comprehension and experience thus far. I was hoping for some kind of like iridescent shimmer glob or something. Anyway, the color is called Olo, and it is conjured when scientists first map your retinas to see where your rods and cones are at, and then use lasers to stimulate certain cones to produce the new color, which then appears as a tiny square within your vision. Apparently, according to the 5 people to whom this has happened. I think I have nailed the science and I'm ready for my grant. But Dan, can you elaborate at all on what I have just described?
Unfortunately, the Trump administration just canceled your grant. But yes, so your eyes contain 3 types of cones. You've got rods and cones. There's a lot more rods than cones. Cones are the ones that do color. And you've got your short cones. Those are for short wavelengths, like your blues. You've got your long cones. Those are for long wavelengths, like your reds. Then you got the middle cones, which sort of fill in the greens, but they don't actually get that much work in the natural world. The short and the long cones mostly interact with each other to do most of the color vision that you do in your everyday life. So some genius scientists at Berkeley thought, all right, what if we shoot a laser right at the medium ones and light them up? And they claim that the result is this incredible, rich, bluish, tealish green that only 5 people have ever seen. You know, even some of the researchers whose names are on the paper have not seen Olo yet because they haven't had their retinas. Can you imagine like spending your entire postdoc discovering a new bologna color and the guys in the lab won't even shoot the laser in your eye so you can see the new bologna color? I like, Dan,
that you explain that like a repair guy who has come to fix my optic nerve. Like, you got your rods, you got your cones.
All right, you got your rods and your cones.
I'm hiring Dan to do a series of science videos for children now. Thank you, Dan. Your next few years are spoken for. All right. How bad do you guys want to see Olo? Sam?
I mean, I am certainly curious here. I mean, I think the implications of this are probably more interesting than the fact that there's like a really super teal out there that in and of itself doesn't excite me yet. But like the sort of, as I understand it, and my science repair man can correct me if I'm wrong here, but just the idea that you can sort of stimulate the eye to see things that aren't there, colors that don't exist in nature, that seems to have all kinds of crazy implications of, both virtual reality and maybe you can, make the blind see or something. And that all sounds really fascinating. The concern troll aspect of this that makes me think of is I was sort of drawing an analogy to like the use of compression technology in music and audio recording, which is basically where they came up with a way to really like sort of squish the waveforms of sound so that everything, all the instruments in music sound louder without actually having to turn the volume up. And it's amazing. In some ways, it makes everything sound sort of super punchy and emphatic, but it has the result of, if you go back and listen to like a record from the 70s, they all sound kind of wimpy and a little underbaked because they're not sort of like punching you in the face with how great the sound are. And if we're like creating colors that are literally achieved by just directly stimulating our optic nerve, it doesn't make like, do you then go like look at a sunset and be like, it's okay, but I've seen more saturated colors. Yeah, the trees outside are green, but they're not that green.
Yeah, it makes me worry that those 5 guys have been spoiled forever for all other color.
Yeah, I'm not that concerned about this becoming a widespread experience. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's silly. I like, color. If you think about color, it's like actually such a mindfuck because it's like the classic quintessential mindfuck, in fact, because like actually all color is like no color is real and all color is your eyes processing like light bouncing off of different structures that have characteristics that are pigments, and we think we all see the color the same, but maybe we don't. I mean, the notion of this becoming a widespread thing that we see, that it's almost like, I don't know, like huffing color or something. And then you're like, man, give me the good stuff. I can't look at this pale, bleak world.
Your first Olo's free, but after that.
They do literally, there's an artist who like made like Olo colored paint, and it's like $10,000 for a can of it, unless you're an artist, in which case it's $30 because he wants people to like paint with Olo. But that is,
he wants to break the Olopoly is what he wants to do.
Pretty much, yeah.
He named the color YOLO, which was right there. More power to him for swinging at the lazy pitch. I have a couple thoughts on this story. Number one is we are obviously living at a moment when all of the brilliance and kookiness and arcana that is modern American science is under like significant attack, and it is poorly understood by large swaths of the country. And like, we are living in a time when our scientific infrastructure is being attacked and broken, right? And one thing I love about this story, even though we are making fun of it, is that it is like a good reminder of what science actually is, which is lots of brilliant, meticulous people in labs doing boring things over and over and over again. And also lots of like curious freaks being like, what if we did blah? Like, what happens when X? The combination of the like methodical, meticulous, boring as fuck, and then the like truly just kids with a science kit being like, what if you put this and this together?
What if I literally shoot a laser into my own eye?
Why not? And they describe this as like laser pointer green too, which just even enhances that. Like, just
the way they know they really found a color is that they adjust it so that it's more like a laser pointer, and then people are like, no, that's different and worse, and somehow that was persuasive. Didn't totally follow that part, but anyway, it's like kind of a beautiful portrait of just how stupid and incomprehensible science can seem when you're outside of the machinery of it, and how each individual experiment ends up adding up to the things that change our lives and matter and allow us to go to the moon or send Katy Perry to space or any range of more and less valuable things we might do in between, So I sort of love that it's highlighting that spirit, and also feel bad making fun of scientists at this moment in history. Sorry, scientists. Good job discovering the color. And then on the color front, I mean, The other thing that's interesting about the world of color as we experience it right now is that the way color works on screens is really different than the way color works in the world. Like color in the world is bouncing off of things, and the color on screens is actual light. When you're looking at a non-screen, ambient light is reflecting off of the surfaces of things, and the color on screens is light. And it slightly changes the kind of color we see and how you perceive color. And that's why, like, you can't look at paint chips on a computer and stuff like that, or you won't get a very accurate result. But the sort of, I have a prejudice against the light that is color beaming at you. So I feel scornful of this teal because it's the kind of light that I think of as a less valuable light. So I'm facing my own light beam prejudices here.
But I don't know that it's wrong to feel a prejudice against a color that simply does not exist in the world as you ever can view and experience it. A color in the same way that I feel that words made by machines are less valuable than words made by humans. A color that only exists when you map your retina and fire a laser into it, to me seems, I don't love it the way I love a color that I might encounter out in the world. Is that like crazy?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about, I mean, color is, I was thinking, about it in art specifically, but color is always sort of created color, at least something that we make, as opposed to like the leaf that I can see out my window. Yeah, it's always a function of technology. Like, you can't see The Wizard of Oz now the way people saw it in the 1930s because they can't make an IB Technicolor print on 35 millimeter film anymore. That technology no longer exists. The Raft of the Medusa will never look the way it did because it's made of a kind of paint that is essentially like going bad over the years, and the colors are fading, and eventually it'll just sort of like fall apart. So that's always part of it. And, part of sort of human endeavor, whether in art or now in science, is kind of, creating things we've never seen before. And that's, great and exciting. And the fact that this is being done, with the intent of sort of stimulating rods and cones rather than like, let me just come up with like a really cool red to, rather than a Yves Klein painting or something, is like, it gets at that really sort of interestingly blurry line between art and science. And I think that's like the most interesting part of this for me. And also that this is clearly like, we've all seen when they make some scientific breakthrough and they have to figure out the way to like package that so that they'll get like newspaper stories written about them. And this is clearly like the sort of promotional end of the scientific stick. So I take it with a grain of salt in that respect as well.
There was one of the stories we read, I think in Scientific American, where the routine is they talk to the scientists, they describe the experiment, they say what's what, and then they go talk to some unaffiliated scientists. And in the nicest possible way, the unaffiliated scientists are like, it's unclear what the applications would be. I was just like, yep.
But I do appreciate that this is purely non-commercial, maybe as uncommercial as you can possibly imagine. Like, you can envision, so to speak, certain scientific breakthroughs that might come about as a result of technology like this, some of the things that Sam mentioned, but it's not, it's not like the new dire wolves. It's not a thing that was made because some company paired up with George R.R. Martin and was like, let's see what crazy extinct creature we can sort of return to the wild, but actually it's not really that creature. It's just a wolf with some genes in it. And so if you're talking about levels of science malarkey, as much as I like to make fun of the new color that you're not allowed to see, it seems more like actual science than, say, the dire wolves.
It's not malarkey. It's a little bit larky, but it's not malarkey. The dire wolves seemed like BS, but this seems genuinely real. Can I ask, when you guys saw these headlines or heard about this, what color did you imagine or hope it would be before you found out it was super teal? Do you remember?
I think the first time I came across it, there was like a little thumbnail on there, but I was like, is it just green? And then I saw some TikTok that purported to be like, well, stare at this red for 60 seconds and then we'll shift to green. And then you'll sort of see, it'll trick your eye into seeing Olo. And that's probably bullshit as well. But it did swim in an interesting way. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the first thing it makes me think of is like there's an H.P. Lovecraft story about like a meteorite that comes from space with a color that no one can see, and it literally drives people insane. So I sort of pictured it more in those terms rather than thinking like, oh, it must be a really bluey blue.
I wanted it to be all the colors at once somehow. Like it's a color, but it's a bunch of colors.
Yeah, I was imagining something like more out there than just like a new teal. Right. And I think it's like funny that it's teal. Like teal is kind of an uncool color. Like it's very like late 80s, early 90s, like sort of magenta and teal. Like it's not chic, you know, like a mustard or a purple right now, I feel like, or more.
No, it's a Miami Beach condo in 1994.
Yeah, it's like a retrograde, like I don't even need a new teal. I barely need regular teal, you know? Like here's a final question for you. The way that I am most annoying to my children is when they ask me what my favorite color is. Gentlemen, what is your favorite color?
What do you mean you're annoying to your children? What do you say when they ask you what's your favorite color is?
I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to come back to it.
My favorite color is green because I like green.
Okay. Sam?
I'm a blue guy. It's like half the clothing I own is blue.
Julia, what's your favorite color?
I don't really have a favorite color, Dan. I believe that like all the colors are incredibly beautiful and that they can all, like, it's really about like the tones of each one or how saturated it is, how dark it is, and how they're used in combination. Like I find color incredibly pleasing, but there's not just one. It's about like how they manifest and are used together.
Oh my God, if I was 10, I would lose my mind right now.
But I can't lie.
Sure, you can lie to your children.
I sometimes do about other things, but actually
try yellow.
But it's not yellow, Sam, and I take color really seriously.
No, say YOLO. Tell them your favorite color. Your favorite color is YOLO. Unfortunately, children, you can't see it. Only mommy gets to see it.
That would drive them even more crazy.
Hey, did you guys know that there are people with 4 kinds of cones instead of 3 kinds of cones who can see 100 times as many colors as the rest of us? Only women can have this characteristic. Only women can be tetrachromats. And they estimate that 1% to 3% of women may have this ability. Julia, maybe that's you, and that's why you can't decide.
Maybe. I don't know. I had a color awakening, which was I didn't take any color theory. I didn't take much art in high school. And I went to a wedding with some family friends. It was like a family friend wedding. And this woman who's like an aunt to me and who's a painter was admiring my sister's dress and was like, great dress. It's a great gray. It has so much red in it. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, it's a great gray because it has so much red in it. And I was like, gray is black and white. What are you talking about? How does the gray have red in it? And she's like, she looked at me like I was illiterate. Like she was like, what do you mean? What do you mean it has red in it? Like gray can have blue in it. It can have red in it. It can have yellow in it. And that makes it all these different colors. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, look at that. She started pointing at everything and like asking me to name the subcolors. And I became aware that, I mean, like illiteracy is the right word. Like I was chromatically illiterate. And I actually went back to New York and took a color theory class at the new school like that fall because I was like, wait, there's this magical way of seeing and thinking that I just never was taught. I think I probably would have said I had a favorite color before I had that conversation and took that class. And I probably would have said it was blue. So team blue, Sam. But once you learn that there's like 10 gajillion blues, how could you say blue? Blue means like 100 different things. Some blues are awesome. Some blues suck.
Like Olo.
Yeah, well, my wife and our one fight is over whether the set of towels we have are purple, which is what I maintain, or brown, which is what she says. So maybe I either need to take this class or maybe she just has that extra set of cones, and that's the issue.
I strongly recommend taking a color theory class. I'm holding on whether to recommend Olo. All right. Well, science, it's great. It should happen. They should fund it. Good job, scientists. Congrats to everyone who's seen the super deal. And I think that brings us to the end of our show. Shall we endorse, gentlemen? All right, Dan, what have you got for us this week?
I've been on a quest this year to discover some new cookbooks because I have cooked basically everything in like tender heart and salt, fat, acid, heat and yeast. And so I need some new stuff.
How could you possibly need more cooking after that crazy cooking recipe project you did? Like how many meals a day do you need to
7
eat?
or 8, Julia, to keep up this robust physique. I have discovered, though, that if you are a person who has been cooking a lot or who spends a lot of time seeking out recipes or writing about recipes or looking at recipes on the New York Times or whatever, it is getting very hard to find a cookbook that like really feels surprising. You know, it's like almost every cookbook that I look at has like maybe 3 interesting recipes where I'm like, oh, I'll try that. And then all the rest is like remixes of things that I've seen a bunch of times before. We're running out of recipes is the problem. We're having a recipe crisis.
Oh no. The scientists need to invent new taste buds.
Exactly.
We are not losing enough recipes.
Plus, a lot of cookbooks are still making the same mistakes. I was working my way through this one Vietnamese cookbook, and it literally said something like, add the onion and cook until jammy and caramelized, about 3 minutes. And I was like, oh,
Tom Skoka siren.
Skoka wrote this piece, his Caramelized Onions Manifesto 13 years ago. I checked. Completely insane that someone is still putting that in a cookbook. But anyways, the cookbook that has pleasantly surprised me and captivated me the most this year is called Third Culture Cooking. It is by Zaynab Issa, who is a Bon-App vet. The book is a nice, interesting mix of East African, South Asian, Middle Eastern, and American mall. So like last night, I made these lovely roasted carrots with the shawarma spice. There's a great recipe for chicken khichdi, which is a dish I'd never come across before, which is a Indian rice and lentil porridge. There's a really good cookie, the best new cookie I've made in a long time, which is date and dark chocolate. But then also the book has a recipe for a fake TGI Fridays artichoke dip. And I totally want to try that. I can't wait to try that. That seems really fun. Anyway, I'm 5 for 5 so far with recipes on this book. And there's a bunch more stuff I want to try. So to me, that makes it endorsable. Third Culture Cooking, Zaynab Issa.
That sounds delicious. I feel like I am interested in having better cookbooks representing those corners of the world too. So I'm going to check that out for sure. Are you a 6 Seasons guy? Have you already cooked your way through that?
I have not. No, I'll check that one out. I know people love it, but I have not.
I would, if you're on the hunt for a reliably revelatory cookbook, I would try that one. You will look at it and not think, I've never done this before, but he's very precise about technique, but in a not too annoying way. And consistently turns out like flavor experiences I haven't had before. It's really, and it's also just great with going to a farmer's market because you can just buy whatever looks interesting and then be like, what does he say to do with it? And if you just follow it.
That's good. That is the power of Tenderheart as well. So that is a good recommendation.
All right, Sam, what have you got for us?
David Thomas died last week. He was, as you may know, if you follow enough music aficionados on social media, the frontman and the only permanent member of the sort of pioneering punk rock band Pere Ubu from Cleveland, who existed in one form or another for almost 50 years. I think the anniversary is coming up in December. I've posted about him a bunch. People have been asking me sort of like, where should I start with this? So what I'm recommending is a collection called The Terminal Tower, which has a bunch of their earliest singles on it and their first album, The Modern Dance. There's a lot more to say about this massive career. And if you want to delve into that, I would recommend going to the obituary that our Slate's own Carl Wilson wrote for his personal newsletter, Critic. That's Critic with 2 R's. Because it's taken from the same Alfred Jarry play that gave Pere Ubu its name. Carl also knew David Thomas, interacted with him a lot. So there's a lot to dig into there that I'm not going to get into here. But what I love about their music, I think, and I've been a fan for basically all my entire life. I took several days to remember, but actually my first sort of professionally published piece was a little blurb in an all weekly recommending one of their gigs. I believe it was sort of over edited and it's not online. So I'm not going to point people to that, but I will point people to these 2 records, which have a lot of these great early songs on them. They're very sort of Sturm und Drangy. They're experimenting a lot, not just with sort of the thrust and attack of punk music, but also those sort of dark electronic textures, synthy stuff of the mid 70s. And a recurring theme in them that I really like is sort of they're written out of the sort of, teen 20s angst, but that is then overlaid with a complete knowing lack of proportion over sort of global, political crises. There's a song called Non-Alignment Pact, which is basically about like not getting along with your ex-girlfriends. That's, sort of compares it to like a geopolitical crisis. There's a song called Final Solution, which is basically about sort of how teenage angst curls into either self-harm or toxic political ideologies. They have a much much later song called Flat, which I love, which is basically takes the story of the first fatal automobile accident in the US and compares it to like a chance meeting with someone that you then end up having a bad relationship with. But these are, great songs that the band changed shape, changed membership so many times over their 50 years. It's impossible to sort of boil down into one thing. But I think those early singles and that first album really give you a good place to start and hopefully will put you as well on a sort of 30, 40 year career of listening to them. So again, that is Pere Ubu's albums, The Terminal Tower and The Modern Dance, and Carl Wilson's obituary for David Thomas in his newsletter, Critic.
I'll second all that and also say, and you can dance to them.
You sure can.
I love those starting points. Thank you for that, Sam. All right. Well, I am going to name check a book that I don't think I've ever read before that my daughter picked out last night that was so apropos to one of our topics and is a fantastic discovery. It is a golden book. Those little golden book, kids' books with the golden spines. It is called Colors Are Nice, and it came out in 1962. And I swear to God, it's like the color book I would have written. The whole point of the book is like normies will ask you if you like red or blue, but what's really beautiful about colors is like how they combine together. Like truly, it like my poorly executed color manifesto that I just gave. Imagine it with like gorgeous 1962 super saturated golden book illustration colors, and then like actually the meter scans, which is my other pet peeve with kids' books. Like, find yourself a little vintage copy of Colors Are Nice. The author is Adelaide Scholl, and the illustrations are by Leonard Shortall. And like, truly, this is my color manifesto. It's like gorgeous and weird in the manner of 60s kids' books. And so if you too want to train your kid to see like a 4-cone genius, get them Colors Are Nice, or at least just buy it and enjoy it. All right. Well, fun show this week, guys. Thank you so much for sitting in.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
You will find links to some of the things we talked about today on our show page. That's slate.com/culturefest. And you can email us at culturefest@slate.com. Our introductory theme music is by the composer Nicholas Patel. Our producer today is Palace Shaw. For Dan Coyce and Sam Adams, I'm Julia Turner, and we'll see you next week.
Six months from now, you could be running a 5K, booking that dream trip, or seeing thicker, fuller hair every time you look in the mirror. Through Hers, you can get dermatologist-trusted, clinically proven prescriptions with ingredients that go beyond what over-the-counter products offer. Whether you prefer oral or topical treatments, Hers has you covered. Getting started is simple. Just fill out an intake form online, and a licensed provider will recommend a customized plan just for you. The best part? Everything is 100% online. If prescribed, your treatment ships right to your door. No pharmacy trips, no waiting rooms, and no insurance headaches. Plus, treatments start at just $35 a month. Start your initial free online visit today at forhers.com/talk. That's forhers.com/talk. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information.